Rescue was his name, and he beat me in Russia.
Oh.
He beat me there.
Michael Spinks was boxing's most cerebral competitor, a calculating strategist who approached every contest like an intricate chess match, requiring careful analysis and methodical execution.
Left hook by Michael Spinks. That right hand on the back.
The Olympic champion possessed superior ring intelligence and technical precision that allowed him to systematically dismantle opponents through strategic planning rather than relying on brute force or natural athleticism. Spinks represented boxing's intellectual evolution, proving that superior thinking could triumph over physical advantages when combined with disciplined preparation and tactical awareness. His methodical approach frustrated crude fighters who preferred emotional confrontation over analytical competition that demanded patience and strategic understanding. But his cerebral style attracted enemies who resented his calculated dominance and questioned whether thinking belonged in boxing's violent environment. Some opponents tried intimidating him through psychological warfare designed to disrupt his analytical process and force emotional responses that would compromise his systematic approach to competition. Others dismissed his Olympic achievements as amateur accomplishments that meant nothing in professional boxing's harsh reality, where street toughness supposedly mattered more than technical education and strategic preparation. The worst adversaries used his quiet demeanor against him, suggesting that intelligent fighters lacked the primitive aggression necessary for championship success. We're revealing 6 boxers who challenged Michael Spinks's intellectual supremacy and discovered that questioning boxing's premier thinking man meant facing systematic destruction through superior planning, technical execution, and calculated violence that proved intelligence was boxing's deadliest weapon. 6. Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. Starting at number 6 is Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, the seasoned professional whose condescending attitude towards Spinks's amateur pedigree represented the old guard's resistance to Olympic-trained fighters entering their established territory. Muhammad possessed years of professional experience and believed that gymnasium education meant nothing compared to street-learned toughness developed through actual combat against seasoned opposition who understood boxing's unwritten rules and survival requirements. The generational divide became apparent when Muhammad began making dismissive comments about college-educated boxers who thought amateur tournaments prepared them for professional boxing's brutal realities. Muhammad viewed Spinks's Olympic gold medal as meaningless decoration that provided false confidence against opponents who had learned their craft through genuine hardship and authentic competition. Muhammad's veteran status gave weight to his criticisms about modern fighters, lacking the fundamental toughness that characterized previous generations who earned respect through demonstrated courage rather than institutional recognition. The established professional treated Spinks like an untested prospect who needed education about boxing's harsh truths that amateur competition could never provide through sanitized tournament environments. Spinks found Muhammad's dismissive attitude personally insulting because it questioned the validity of his entire athletic foundation while suggesting that his systematic preparation was somehow inferior to street-learned instincts. The Olympic champion understood that defeating Muhammad required proving that technical education could overcome experiential knowledge when applied through superior conditioning and strategic preparation. Their encounter became Spinks's opportunity to demonstrate that amateur excellence translated directly into professional success when combined with intelligent game planning and dedicated physical preparation that maximized natural advantages over opponents who relied solely on accumulated experience. 5. Marvin Johnson. At number 5 is Marvin Johnson, the Indianapolis brawler whose intimidation tactics and psychological warfare represented everything Spinks detested about primitive boxing mentality that prioritized fear over skill in determining competitive outcomes. Johnson believed that mental domination through threatening behavior could overcome technical superiority by disrupting opponents' concentration and forcing mistakes that negated their strategic advantages. The clash of philosophies became evident when Johnson started making inflammatory statements about Spinks lacking the killer instinct necessary for championship-level violence against determined opposition. Johnson viewed Spinks's analytical approach as evidence of weakness, rather than recognizing it as a sophisticated methodology for achieving decisive victories through superior preparation and tactical execution. Johnson's crude fighting style violated every principle of technical boxing that Spinks considered essential for long-term success and professional development. The Indianapolis fighter relied on raw aggression and physical intimidation rather than developing the systematic skills that separated authentic champions from temporary contenders who succeeded through fortunate circumstances. Spinks found Johnson's approach personally offensive because it reduced boxing to street fighting while dismissing the intellectual elements that made the sport a legitimate athletic pursuit requiring education and strategic thinking. Johnson represented the anti-intellectual bias that plagued boxing's development as a respectable competitive endeavor worthy of serious analysis. Their confrontation became Spinks's chance to prove that superior intelligence and technical preparation would always defeat primitive aggression when applied through disciplined execution and strategic planning. Johnson's defeat validated Spinks's belief that boxing's future belonged to educated athletes rather than crude fighters who relied on intimidation instead of legitimate skill development. Number 4 brings us Dwight Muhammad Qawi, the Philadelphia buzzsaw whose relentless pressure and unbreakable will pushed Spinks beyond his comfortable zone of calculated control into emotional warfare that challenged his systematic approach. Qawi represented the ultimate test of Spinks's mental fortitude because his grinding style created prolonged suffering that could not be solved through tactical adjustments or strategic modifications alone. The psychological challenge intensified when Qawi demonstrated complete indifference to Spinks's technical advantages while maintaining constant pressure that wore down his opponent's physical reserves and mental composure. Qawi's stubborn resilience forced Spinks to dig deeper into emotional reserves he rarely accessed during his methodical dismantling of less determined opposition. The Philadelphia warrior earned genuine respect by proving that some battles required heart over mind to achieve victory. Qawi became the opponent who taught Spinks that championship boxing sometimes demanded abandoning calculated strategy in favor of primitive determination and emotional commitment that transcended intellectual analysis and systematic preparation through pure, competitive fury. 3. Matthew Saad Muhammad. At number 3 is Matthew Saad Muhammad, the erratic Philadelphia warrior whose unpredictable fighting style and mental instability created unprecedented challenges for Spinks's systematic approach to opponent analysis and strategic preparation. Saad Muhammad possessed devastating knockout power combined with psychological volatility that made him impossible to predict or prepare for through conventional scouting methods. The analytical nightmare began when Spinks realized that traditional opponent study meant nothing against someone whose fighting patterns changed based on emotional states rather than consistent tactical frameworks. Saad Muhammad's mercurial personality created multiple fighting identities that could emerge during any given round, making strategic planning nearly impossible. Spinks discovered that his methodical preparation routines were inadequate when facing opponents whose behavior defied logical analysis and systematic categorization. Saad Muhammad's combination of genuine skill and psychological unpredictability represented the antithesis of everything Spinks valued about controlled competition and rational athletic performance. The Philadelphia fighter's reputation for dramatic comebacks and sudden explosions of violence created additional psychological pressure that disrupted Spinks's normal confidence in his analytical abilities. Saad Muhammad could transform from passive participant to devastating destroyer without warning, making every moment dangerous regardless of apparent control. Their encounters forced Spinks to develop contingency plans for scenarios that seemed impossible to anticipate through conventional preparation methods. Saad Muhammad taught him that some opponents transcended systematic analysis through pure unpredictability combined with legitimate destructive capability that could emerge at any moment during competition. 2. Jerry Cooney. Number 2 is Jerry Cooney, the manufactured white hope whose massive promotional investment and media attention represented everything wrong with boxing's commercial priorities that valued marketability over merit. Spinks watched an inferior fighter receive unprecedented promotional support and financial opportunities, while his own superior accomplishments were ignored by the same organizations that celebrated Cooney's limited achievements. The racial dynamics became impossible to ignore as Cooney's careful protection and systematic development contrasted sharply with the dangerous opposition that Spinks faced throughout his championship ascent. The promotional machine invested millions creating artificial credibility for Cooney, while Spinks earned his reputation against elite competition without comparable marketing support or media coverage. The financial disparities became particularly galling as Cooney earned massive purses for facing carefully selected opponents, while Spinks generated smaller paydays despite facing significantly more dangerous competition. Spinks realized that commercial success depended more on promotional manipulation than actual boxing excellence or competitive achievement. The situation crystallized everything frustrating about boxing's business model that rewarded manufactured stars while authentic champions struggled for recognition and financial compensation. Cooney represented the triumph of marketing over merit that threatened to corrupt boxing's competitive integrity through systematic favoritism based on demographic considerations rather than sporting accomplishment. 1. Mike Tyson. And finally, at number 1, the most psychologically devastating encounter of all, Mike Tyson, the destructive force whose mere presence shattered Spinks's analytical confidence and proved that some opponents transcended rational preparation through pure terror. Tyson represented the antithesis of everything Spinks believed about boxing's intellectual possibilities by embodying primitive destruction that could not be countered through strategic planning or technical superiority. The psychological warfare began months before their actual encounter, as Tyson's reputation for explosive violence created unprecedented anxiety that disrupted Spinks's normal preparation routines and analytical confidence. The thinking man discovered that his systematic approach meant nothing when facing someone whose destructive capability transcended normal competitive parameters. Spinks experienced genuine fear for the first time in his professional career as Tyson's aura of invincibility compromised his ability to think clearly and execute strategic plans that had been developed through careful analysis and preparation. The mental intimidation proved more devastating than any physical punishment because it attacked Spinks's fundamental identity as boxing's premier intellectual competitor. The career-ending defeat proved that boxing's intellectual evolution had limitations when confronting pure destruction, embodied by perfectly trained athletic specimens who combined natural gifts with systematic preparation. Tyson represented everything that Spinks could never overcome through analysis, planning, or technical superiority alone when facing the sport's most perfectly destructive competitor. From analytical mastery to psychological terror, Michael Spinks proved intelligence has limits against pure destruction. Which challenge surprised you most? Subscribe for more cerebral boxing breakdowns.